I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek. So we're almost to Star Trek Discovery. We're
in freak out mode.
Nine days to go, day of recording. So by the time this is posted, we'll probably be in the final week.
If this was a show we were putting on, the audience would be like in the auditorium, and we'd be all nervous and doing drugs.
Cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
But today, me and Dave have put together a list of the top 10 things we want to see in Star Trek Discovery. Yep. So we both have our own list. Haven't told each other what we have.
This is exciting. This is like in the very first show when we talked about what things we like about Star Trek.
Yeah.
I think.
So we have no idea what the other one's going to say. They could be 10 identical things, or they could be completely different. We'll find out.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Before we get into that, just some updates on Star Trek Discovery, and some of the newer developments and things that have been going on online. We have a couple of clips available now. Sonequa Martin-Green was making the rounds for CBS, promoting the show. She appeared on Colbert and debuted a clip.
I didn't watch it.
Yeah, we won't talk about it if you want to avoid spoilers, but there's not much to it. I don't think it's going to give much away. If you're into that, we'll have a link posted in the description where you can go and check it out.
Did you like it?
Yes. And I also liked the other clip that
I'm only avoiding even though I know it's not going to be too spoilery, I think we're close enough at this point that if it's not vital, I'm going to go ahead and wait for the show.
And I normally avoid clips. I don't like to watch clips for movies. For the TV show, I guess I'm a little bit more less protective of myself because I know it's only going to be the first episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, a movie you've got like 2 to 3 hours. TV show you're going to have like 20 hours or something.
But there's also another clip that the following morning she appeared on the CBS morning show. I think it's called Good Morning CBS or something to that effect. Showing another clip there. So she was in New York, showing up on Colbert on a late night and then getting up in the early morning. The CBS studios to show the second clip.
I don't envy the people doing the press junket stuff. I saw little bits and pieces, and it looked like she acquitted herself admirably. She looked like she was a personable guest.
Yeah, she seems really cool, and the other actors that have worked with her on the show, they all say that she's a great leader on the set. They all love working with her. They have game nights while they're shooting in Toronto, and the actors and the crew are all playing games, and she's kind of the one organizing that.
Oh, interesting.
She seems like
she's got like the planner instinct, maybe.
You know, she's
the den mother.
Yeah, and she seems like a really nice person to have as the star of the show, because sometimes in
so
TV
we're not going to get a Shatner.
Like you have a kind of an asshole who's the star, and everyone has to just kowtow to them. And but those clips will have links in the description if you want to check those out. So the next thing we're going to talk about is an interview that Star Trek Discovery producer and writer Ted Sullivan gave to SFX magazine, where he finally started giving some explanations for the Klingon aesthetics of Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, interesting.
So everyone who is...
It's like a touchy area.
Yeah, everyone who's been like pulling their hair out looking at these Klingon ships and Klingon bald heads, you can calm down a little bit. We're getting an explanation. So as far as the sarcophagus ship goes, Ted Sullivan explained, it's a 200-year-old ship. This is a group of Klingons who've gone back to a Puritan way of life. They look very different. They wear armor that's 200 years old, and they don't have any hair. Their commander runs his Klingon house, the House of T'Kuvma, by the rules of Kahless, the Klingon Messiah, and he calls himself the second coming of the Klingon Messiah. In the past, Klingons have not really cared about their dead. They're not like Marines. But these Klingons are. The outside of the ship is covered in thousands of coffins. Some are 300 years old, some are just 2 days old. Downstairs is the death room where they prepare their dead. Then the coffins get raised up and put on the outside. So we actually see them raising a coffin in one of the trailers.
That's a quick shake. So I didn't know about this bit that you just read. That all sounds super cool to me, and it speaks to the kind of the deepest fear about the Klingons is like, this is just how Klingons are now. it does seem like these guys are very specifically a strange sect.
Yeah, they sound almost like cultish. Like this
Yeah.
guy has like a cult built around him. Like I'm the second coming of Kalis.
Right, it's like a pyramid with warp nacelles.
That's one of the things I was like, why would there be Klingon sarcophaguses when we know from the Next Generation that Klingons they view a dead body as an empty shell after the soul departs and goes to the Tovacor. Mm-hmm. But the writers are acknowledging that these are these aren't your typical Klingons.
Right, presumably there will be something in the story itself where they'll talk about why they splintered from Klingon dogma on that or something.
And
incidentally, on the trailer for this, I was rewatching it. It looks like a large ship. Like it didn't. It, like in the shot, I believe it sort of dwarfs the Discovery.
The Shenzhou.
Or Shenzhou.
Yeah. The ship is gigantic, and so it was this ancient ceremonial. I guess you wouldn't call it ancient if it's 200 years old, but it's centuries old ship that is very ceremonial and not a typical Klingon ship.
It's a cool idea, and one though I'm sure we've seen funerary things before. I don't know if I've seen a ship per se like that. Certainly not from the Klingons. It's a lot of interesting possibilities.
Although it still maintains the same basic shape of the the D7 design that Matt Jeffries did.
Yeah, sort of bird-like, condor-like.
So moving on to our next topic, we've found out that Star Trek Discovery will have a review embargo all the way until it actually drops on CBS. And there's
everybody was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah. When I heard this news, I was relieved because I don't want to get any more spoilers. Mm-hmm. And it made a lot of sense to me. In fact, I was kind of already thinking that this might happen.
Mm-hmm. Just as a quick counterpoint, their quasi-rival show, The Orville, that just came out, like there were reviews of that hitting that
did not shed the best light on the Orville.
Right, but beyond that, they also they spilled the beans on every plot point and all this stuff.
Oh yeah,
and they talked you through the whole first episode. There's a lot of websites that will do that's a thing that they do and that people are even there for. But for me, I don't like that philosophy of spilling it all. I want people to get a shot to see it.
Well, here's the thing: is I've said this for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Almost 2 years. The way that they're going to premiere the show, it's going to have one episode that ends with a big gut punch that makes you want to watch the second episode.
Right.
And they have to have this hook to get subscribers for CBS All Access. You don't want any part of that to be diminished by reviews.
Right.
So I think it makes sense. I think it's
actually very specific to their model.
I mean, of course, if you have a good product, you want to get it out in the spotlight in front of critics and get articles about it online and get people talking about it. Mm-hmm. You obviously want to use that to market the show.
Right.
But they have a lot more to lose than gain in the situation, I think. And also it might be because of their involvement with Netflix, the amount of money Netflix has paid in the show. Mm-hmm. They don't really do big premieres like this. A lot of times Netflix just drops the stuff.
Right, yeah, it just happens. So, the models are changing now as everything in our society is changing. And we have a president who tries to forego the press to jump straight to the people with Twitter. I'm not saying that this is an analogous model. I'm just saying things are changing. Yeah. There could be good and bad uses of it. The review community is interesting. I've done comic reviews and other stuff. We've done reviews here, and we'll continue to do more as we go along. But it is a kind of as a community, it can be self-important. It can be overly dismissive. It can also be sycophantic, and you can have people who've been paid off or whatever. But I don't venerate reviewers though. I don't think that something has to go through the review community to be allowable to sit in front of me or something.
Yeah.
It's not like some mythic thing that happens that's so magically transformative that it makes the show good. So, yeah, I can see why people were a little worried about it. It has at times meant bad things for movies.
Oh, for sure, definitely.
Certainly studios have tried to hush up, bad movies and stuff, or TV shows. But I think you're right. The model to this one makes it it's the sensible thing to do.
Yeah. And it worked out good for me because I'm at the point where I don't want to learn anything else about the show, and I'm applauding CBS All Access for using their all these countless promos that they're putting out, the clips they're putting out. They're not giving much away except for what we already knew from the trailers.
Right. It's kind of neat stuff to see about behind the scenes about the how they built up the tech.
Yeah.
And
show me that. Don't show me your narrative.
Right. It's not a story.
Keep me in the dark as far as that's concerned. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we'll find out next week when we finally get to sit down and watch the show. But we will move on to the top 10 things we're hoping to see in Star Trek Discovery. Dave, do you want to start off with your number 10?
Yes, let's do it. Okay. All right. I've talked about this before, and by the way, I asked Fatheree before we did this whether these are very specific things, like I want to see such and such, border war or something like that, or is it going to be generic things like, we want to see more stronger roles for women? Is it going to which of those two? I went with pretty broad things. I'm just going to tell you in advance. These are sort of broad things. One that I've talked about before. I want to see in Discovery casually progressive social interactions. When I say casually, I mean it's just their everyday stuff is what. You know that meme, the future liberals want?
Yeah.
Everybody's repurposed it and stuff. I want it to be the future liberals want. And I want that to be where there's casual... sorry. I'm looking at this. Casual sort of multiculturalism, casual acceptance of homosexuality, and any sort of, it doesn't have to be front and center. In fact, I don't want it to be front and center. But, the various stripes of non-monogamy out there. Mm-hmm. They've talked about it in shows before.
Aren't these things that are already, or at least implied, are already in Star Trek?
I think Star Trek has always fallen down when it comes to depicting homosexual relationships.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they pussied around about it a whole lot in the 90s, and they actually fell down when they should have been leading. And a bunch of other shows overtook them. So we know that they're going to have at the forefront a homosexual relationship, presumably as casually held as the one that Sulu had in
Star Trek Beyond.
Star Trek Beyond, but obviously with greater depth. So I want to see all of those things just casually done. Asexuals, that's a sort of newer idea. People are becoming aware of this concept that seems to have been around forever, but maybe did not get the spotlight and were sort of distrusted, or people didn't buy into it. It's one more thing that I think could be in there. There's lots of stuff that Star Trek has not really been upfront about.
There's never been any transgender representation and stuff, or really in much of any television, but.
Right, I feel like there's been
areas they can cover.
Sense8, I know, where it was kind of definitely breaking barriers there, and what is it? Orange is the New Black. So it's happening, but it would be nice if it happened on the show that some people think is just the one where spaceships fly around and blow shit up.
Okay.
All right.
So my number 10 is very different. This is on the complete other end of the spectrum. My number 10 thing I want to see in Star Trek Discovery is the episode title on screen. Which I actually noticed they did that with Orville.
Okay.
But after the credits, whenever you cut back into the show, they would always have the name of the episode. It would say the Man Trap, or the Emissary, or
Best of Both Worlds Part 1.
Best of Both Worlds, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, which they don't really do in TV anymore. And
yeah, that's
really
true.
In the 80s, when Next Generation came back, it was still pretty rare. In fact, even in the 60s, there were shows that weren't doing that. Here's
a question, though. I'm going to slight challenge you on this one. That works especially well with done-in-one shows, standalones where you're going to the Man Trap, I'm going to remember this episode. When it's a more serial format, where you're going to have these shows episodes linked together and maybe be part of a larger tapestry, do you think there's a possibility that the titles will not be as meaningful?
DS9 did it. And, if you watch the last 10 episodes of DS9 are basically structured like a Game of Thrones season.
What's one of their cool titles?
DS9 actually has some really good titles.
Right, they were like more of a throwback to the original
series.
Right?
And I don't want to see like these boring Next Generation and Voyager.
You don't want one that's called Memories or The Forgotten or something.
Yeah, don't give me just like a, give me something dramatic like.
You want the Hammer and Anvil or
like Tears of the Prophets was a DS9 one, or the very last episode, What We Leave Behind. Stuff like that. Give me the dramatic TOS style.
The Devil in the Dark is a cool episode title. Balance of Terror is a cool episode title.
Yeah, some of them were weird. Like Amok Time, I was never really sure what that meant.
Right.
As a kid.
Right. Like it makes it sound like it's a time travel episode. You're going amok in time, but it's like no, it's more like what time is it? It's the amok time.
Yeah, but
I don't know if maybe it has a source that I don't know. I'm sure we could easily look it up.
Yeah, there's also a lot of episode titles that are drawn from like Shakespeare, like The Conscience of the King and stuff like that. They take stuff from literature, but yeah, I mean, The Savage Curtain. That sounds cool. I don't know what it's about, but I want to watch it. That sounds like something that would be exciting.
They're evocative names.
But yeah, DS9 had...
Wasn't there a classic Trek one, Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth or something like that?
That was the animated series.
Oh, was it? Still a good title.
Yeah, but DS9 had things like, The Changing Face of Evil, Till Death Do Us Part. They had the weird Latin one that was Inter Arma Inum Silent Legis.
Oh, wow. That's like a full sentence.
Yeah, it means in times of war, the law falls silent.
Oh, interesting.
But... yeah, so give us cool, dramatic, exciting episode titles, and show us the title of the episode on screen. So, Dave, what do you have for your number 9?
My number 9 one is awesome because the number 9 one is sex. I'm going with broad categories here.
I rarely say no to that.
So I feel like, Trek has always had some sexuality in there. Sometimes it's kind of lurid. It's the chicks in the silver bikinis in the original series. It's Seven of Nine or T'Pol in later series. It tends to be leaning a little bit on the side of, I'm going to say mild exploitation or titillation for guys. But I don't know. I guess we got to the era where we had, like, Trip is taking off his shirt. But that's just the sort of that's sort of surface level. What I actually want is I want to see sort of an acknowledgement of sex among the crew members and sort of meaningful relationships. I feel like in the post Game of Thrones era, where I don't expect that sort of nudity in there. Although I guess they have the option if they want, right? They have some.
Yeah, but
they're not going to.
I don't think they're going to do that.
They're not going to jump at it, but I want to see it treated with some sophistication. I want to see relationships that are good and bad. So this is also relationships and not just sex, but an acknowledgement of it. Games like Mass Effect acknowledged the some strangeness and had both humor and serious things to say about like interspecies sex. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I necessarily need Trek to go there, but
that never really is handled well. And like Babylon 5 has touched on that. Star Trek Voyager touched on it.
I think it's usually either kind of played like for laughs, or sometimes it's portrayed as. Like I don't need biological explanations of it. That's a little far. It can
get real weird real fast.
Right. So really what I want is the sophisticated relationship. So when I think about that, I'm thinking about like to use Game of Thrones with it, whether it's Tyrion's relationship with the prostitute or whatever that was sort of like a plant to manipulate him, but who meant everything to him. Maybe, why can't I say the brother and sister?
The Lannisters, Jaime and Cersei.
Jaime and Cersei have a sophisticated relationship. I'm not necessarily saying Star Trek needs incest. Well, I'm saying Star Trek needs an interesting relationship.
If Michael Burnham and Spock are going to be brother and sister, who knows?
Who knows? So anyway,
they could Luke and Leia them up,
right? But I'm not. That's not the takeaway. The takeaway is just that I want some of that sophisticated acknowledgement of it. Big part of the human experience, and I want Star Trek to a little bit more than it has traditionally represent that. And I think that they have a little bit more leeway with the format of the show to do it. Mm-hmm. All right, what do you got? Your number 9.
My number 9 is classic ships.
Yep.
I know that they're doing a lot of new designs, and they look great. What we've seen, I have gotten pretty attached to the Shinzu and the Discovery, and some of the other Klingon and Federation ships that we've seen in the promos and trailers. But I would love to see, even if it's just in the background, give me like a Matt Jeffries D7. Give me, I'd kind of like to see an old school Connie. I don't know if they would do that, but maybe Daedalus class or an NX refit that Doug Drexler designed. Anything like that would be just a cool little nod. Just put it in the background somewhere.
So I would love to see the classic ships in there. I would also love to see, I guess, are we going to see Romulan ships, or was that kind of a big thing when they saw the bird? The Bird of Prey was kind of a new thing when Kirk.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll see Romulan ships, but maybe we'll talk about Romulans later in our countdown of things we want to see.
What about those, like the classic space stations?
Oh, like the K7.
Yeah,
that'd be really cool.
I'd be down for seeing that. I'm sure they would get a visual overhaul, but I'd love to see the basics of it there. And this list of yours also slightly touches on something that I'll talk about later, but I can hold off.
Okay.
Should I jump to mine, though?
So, yeah, what is your number 8?
All right, my number 8 is I want cool space battles.
I'm pretty sure we're getting that.
Star Trek is going to... I know that they'll basically deliver on it. What I would particularly like to see, and I think we might get this because of the sort of the serious underpinnings I'm sensing from the trailer, and is... Although the military side of Star Trek is not... They don't lean into it, right? They're like, we're science with a little bit of military. For the space battles and stuff, I would not mind if they leaned into it a little bit on this one, if there's going to be sort of like, extended warfare with the Klingons and that kind of stuff. I wouldn't mind seeing more of the tactics beyond, the just outwitting them in some sort of, mental game. I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more about, like, fire a photon torpedo spread to try and drive them into our phaser burst or whatever they might want to be doing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of touch on that in Deep Space Nine a little bit in some of their big battle episodes. But, I mean, there are things like you have people shouting, like, send galaxy wings to, flank the Cardassians and, stuff like that. And I'm getting the impression, and I've even, heard the producers and writers mention this a little bit, but I think there is going to be a little bit of DS9 influence in the show as far as how they depict that type of stuff. One cool thing that they've said is that there's a lot of Star Trek fans in the writers' room, and a lot of them approach Trek from very different directions, and they have different favorite shows and stuff. So I know that there is going to be people in there who are like those big DS9 fans.
Right.
That they're going to be like, oh well, if we're going to do a big battle sequence, here's a good style that we can incorporate into what we're doing.
And I will say that, like, I do feel that they might... One of the styles that I think could be successful would be to lean into the Kelvin timeline stuff, which is faster moving, ships racing around. Not there, they didn't so much talk about tactics, but they were exciting to watch.
Yeah.
And I think that they did do a good job of that, and it would sort of make sense
Were they racing around, though? They're not really...
what
big dynamic space
maybe it was the way it's more like whenever they showed the Enterprise duking it out with what was the
Vengeance,
Romulan ship,
the
Narada. It was always it was filmed to look like it was flying really fast, blasting stuff all over the place. I'd also say that of the ship that from the very beginning they got trashed.
There's only like 2 shots in that movie where they're actually shooting phasers towards the Narada.
Whenever they do it, or actually whenever they're depicting them, even when it's just them in warp and stuff like that, it's all faster than it's ever been before, and feels. It feels very intense and of the moment. Like you are there and you're getting thrown around and stuff inside those.
Like when the in Star Trek Into Darkness, when the Enterprise gets shot out of warp and it's kind of like spinning out of control.
Right.
And you see people like floating out through the holes in the hole. And...
I did always like it. I mean, I was shocked by it a bit as a kid in Wrath of Khan, seeing, for the first time, seeing real casualties like that. I don't want it to be like a full-on wartime show. I don't want it to be like the Dunkirk of TV, of Star Trek. But I wouldn't, like I say, I wouldn't mind them leaning into a little bit of the wartime consequences and tactics of it. So, and of course, Wrath of Khan is the personal favorite of mine with its sort of submarine style warfare. I don't necessarily need to see that exactly. It's my favorite, that sort of the ships stalking each other sort of effect. But I could lean into a pretty wide variety of approaches they might do.
Cool. So that would bring me to my number. We're on 8.
Yep.
And that is, I know this is on your list somewhere.
Yeah.
But Star Trek-ish music. And
you know what? Somehow that is not on my list.
Oh wow!
I think I missed. I'm gonna steal that though, because I think what we learned about the Klingons might ruin one of my numbers.
Well, we know that we're getting a main theme that's not going to have lyrics like Enterprise. It's like an actual classical theme, which I should say that is also available if you want to hear a snippet of it and see the composer Anthony Russo talk about composing this. I'll post a link to that as well. I thought I was going to hold off on watching that, but I
broke?
Yeah, I went ahead. I don't want to hear like the music that's actually going to be in the show, but something that's just going to go over like a title sequence. Mm-hmm. I don't mind hearing that ahead of time. I'm excited that they are doing an opening credits sequence, because a lot of TV shows don't do that anymore for whatever reason.
You get a little like flash or arrow or whatever, a little 10-second logo shot or less than that. Sometimes just 2 or 3 seconds, and boom, you're in the show.
Yeah, like besides,
it does have a certain immediacy to it.
Like I know Netflix and HBO still have credit sequences.
Yeah.
But like anything that's on normal TV, where I guess like they have commercial breaks, they don't do that. Like they want to keep you like into the show as long as they can before they have to cut to commercial.
Right. Trek has always been a little bit somewhat about branding, and it is a traditional element of Trek branding to have a kind of sweeping opening sequence.
And also on that note, I want to have kind of more modern than what they've done in Trek before, where you have one composer work on the series long term, and he's actually like writing certain themes for specific characters and stuff like that.
Right, he's like you want somebody who's like the voice.
Yeah,
of the...
I want to have musical continuity like throughout the show, like because the other shows they would just cycle through different composers.
You want leitmotifs for the characters.
Yes. And another thing I really want is Klingon war songs. I want Klingons to sing about glorious victory and dying and going to Sto-vo-kor.
If they're going to show the Klingons in depth, they really need to.
I would love if they reused some of the Klingon war songs we heard before on Next Generation and Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. That
I'll
would
sing along.
Something like that would show a real allegiance to fans. It wouldn't... I don't think it would hurt anything, and I think it only stands to help by like showing kind of a little an acknowledgement, the way the Marvel movies smartly show acknowledgement of the comics and the fans, even though they're not strictly slavish in representing the comics.
But things get kind of complicated with like the rights to music. It's kind of like a different copyright than the rest of the so I don't know if
I thought that's only if they like use pop music and stuff like that.
Well, no, because I know to license like the original series theme, it's like a different license.
Than, sounds
show,
like some archaic element of just the way TV was made then or something.
Yeah, maybe. But what do you have to say about the music?
I totally agree. I always loved was it Alexander Courage and all the other composers of Star Trek, the original series. That is for sure my favorite, but I also have a lot of fondness for James Horner in the movies.
Jerry Goldsmith. Who does the Kelvin movies? He does like every movie now. What's his name? Italian name?
Giacchino. Giacchino or Giacchino. He did The Incredibles and a bunch of other stuff too. And he seems pretty versatile. He wrote a good theme, I felt, for the Kelvin movies.
Yeah.
I thought that was like energetic and like robust and heroic and all that stuff.
It fit into Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. It may have been the most Star Trek thing about the movies. I would love to see that. I did get used to a more limited role for music in the various Next Gen series. There were times when they would lean on it a little bit more than others, and the times when it was less, but I always felt it was less prominent overall than the original series. And maybe that's just kind of modern TV, But
Well, the original series had like a few episodes where they actually had music composed for it,
Right.
and then they just recycled all of that.
right, but everybody knows like the Doomsday Machine theme and the Amok Time battle music.
Dun, 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 dun. Which they
Exactly.
reused in Star Trek Into Darkness.
Did they really?
Yeah, when Khan is fighting Spock.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm completely with you on this. I don't know how it didn't make my list.
That really surprises me.
I was drunk when I made it.
No,
I'm
well.
just kidding.
Shall we move on to number 7?
Sure. Let me see. Like I say, mine tend to be kind of conceptual. What I want to see, and this is another one that we've seen in Trek, but I would like to see a major role for it. Is I want to see challenges to Federation ideology. I feel like DS9 probably had the most of that, but there's always been some element of it. And I'll give you an example of where I think it was dramatically done. This is an original series episode. What was it? What was the one with the Organians? I can't say.
Errand of Mercy.
Errand of Mercy. Actually, yeah, Errand of Mercy, where Kirk wants to like go to war with the Klingons. He's ready to do it. The Organians have to shut him down by being like the adults to the children, and even Kirk is acting like a child. Now that's not Federation ideology per se, but it is sort of, I would say it might be considered like a representation of the zeitgeist of America. The let's kick the Ruskies' ass that back in the '60s. And he was kind of clearly in the wrong, and yet dramatically made a case for going to war with them. It was a difficult decision because you're like, well, wait, isn't the Kirk the hero here? Shouldn't he be the one who's saying the right things all the time? But he doesn't seem like he necessarily is right here. I think whatever that it is that Michael Burnham does in the first episode is going to clearly be some morally dubious thing that sets them on their path.
Yeah, it's something that comes with consequence.
Right. And I think that's sort of one of the other big things is, we know that the Federation, there's not a lot of want in the Federation. They can afford to have the extreme morals that we would consider them to have. But I want to see them challenged. I want to see how they deal with difficult cultural stuff, which I think the Klingons is going to do.
Well, you're talking about there not being a lot of want in the Federation. That's
right.
Ben Sisko has a cool quote in DS9 where he says, "It's easy to be a saint in paradise."
Yeah, that's exactly sums it up. This will be, in that slightly more. I feel like that notion sort of codified in Picard's era, and in Kirk's era it was a little more rough and tumble. So this preceding Kirk's era, the Federation is probably not quite the paradise we would think it is in Picard's era.
For sure.
But by and large, they're still going to have a strong morality and all that. And I just want to see it challenged. I want to see it challenged in a meaningful way. I don't want to see it overthrown because I believe in Federation ideology essentially. So I don't want to see it dethroned, but I want to see it shown that like. No ideology fits every situation. You might have to make ugly choices sometimes to come out on top or to do a greater good. That's total Ben Sisko stuff. So anyway, that's my number 7.
Okay. I don't really have much to add to that, so I'll just go straight into my number 7.
Go for it.
Which is, I want to see classic aliens.
This is our first exact duplicate, and it's in the exact same spot.
Okay, well, let's just...
Mine was listed as classic Trek aliens, but I do have a specific caveat to mine, so you go ahead.
Number 6, right? Because we just did your 7.
I don't know. So. I lost track because I didn't number these. This is whatever my next one was. But anyway, you go ahead, and then I'll follow up with my addendum to it.
So... Specifically, I would like to see some Endorians and Tellarites, just because we know those are supposed to be like these founding races of the Federation, but yet like we hardly ever see them over the course of Star Trek.
It's one of those things that's kind of bothered me about Next Generation and stuff. I was like, is this Tellarite erasure? Are they trying to not acknowledge their accomplishments?
Yeah, I mean that was very intentional, is to get away from the TOS stuff. But I want to see. I think it's really cool if they could find a way to use Romulans, maybe not in season 1, and you also have the difficulty of, to adhere to canon. They can't know what they look like. No one can see a Romulan, but it would make a lot of sense if the Romulans were instigating a war between the Klingons and the Federation.
Right.
Like
manipulating people at things is what they do. They're the Lannisters of space.
Yeah. So if that was like the arc, that this is all like a big part of a Romulan plot, that would be a cool way to use them, and you wouldn't necessarily have to have anyone see them, because it would all be you wouldn't do that overtly out in the open. You'd all be behind the scenes,
right
in the shadows. I would love to see.
I think we did. I think touch on this in a previous episode. Do you want the viewer to see them though? The viewer to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So you want to see some Romulans on screen. It's just that the lead characters probably should not be allowed to see.
Like Enterprise did with the Romulans, where the audience can see them, but the characters can't. And I think it'd be cool if they had some classic Klingons show up somewhere along the way. But yeah, just give me some of those, because we haven't really seen any classic aliens in the besides the Vulcans. We haven't really seen anything
in the trailers
so far
yet.
So
yeah, it's true.
I do want to see new aliens and new designs, but I kind of want it to be a little bit of mix. Give me an Andorian to walk across the background or something.
It's one of the reasons people like shared universes, is that sense of continuity, and so my specific addendum to that is.
So we're in your number 6 now, but
and I think let me see. Yeah, that's right. My number 6 is classic Trek aliens, and I'm especially hoping for Tellarites. I think that Star Trek characters can be a little stodgy at times, and I think somebody who's argumentative, which is like their foremost trait. They're the pig-headed guys who literally look like pigs. It's a
Star Trek subtlety that
unsubtle
we talk
metaphor,
about so much.
but I liked it. I think you could have fun with it. I think the thing I think would be most interesting would be to actually have a character who, the one we saw in Journey to Babel, he seemed kind of like a bullying kind of jerk.
How will you vote, Sarika Vulcan?
That was the guy. Is it Gav? I think.
Yeah.
And what does he say? He's like, Tellarites do not argue to win; they argue to argue, or something to that effect.
Yeah, Sarek is kind of being a little racist.
Passive aggressive racist. There, yeah. But what I would like to see is like a principled Tellarite, a guy who's belligerent for a cause, but that's just who he is. It is a cultural thing for him to be kind of brash about that. I'd like to see a supporting character or a recurring character who's a Tellarite.
Yeah, I can relate to Tellarites. So. My number 6 is going to be, I want to have innovative special effects, and what I mean by that is, I love that this show is getting like a huge budget, but a lot of people love Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It's considered the most popular Star Trek movie. A lot of people say it is the best one. Yep. People who don't even like Star Trek tend to like The Wrath of Khan.
Right.
That movie was made on a shoestring budget compared to any of the other movies.
Right.
And so they had to do some very innovative special effects with like the models, how they created the Matari Nebula.
Right.
And I'm hoping that even with like all this money, where they can just like do whatever they want with special effects, that they can still come up with, even though it won't be as necessary, I'm hoping that the guys will just be talented enough that they will come up with like this really innovative stuff that we haven't seen before. Because in 1982, you did have Star Wars amazing special effects, visuals no one had ever seen before, but something like the Mutari Nebula was still super unique.
Right.
Like,
or even the video that they watch of how the Genesis thing works, where you have the fly over the... I think it was CG, early CG.
Yeah, that was actually Industrial Light and Magic's first little CGI experimental department that would later become Pixar.
Oh, wow. And there was... it was also in the way that those battle scenes were edited and all of that, but it had a feeling of I think there was a sort of realism to the ships. Probably, the models brought that out. They avoided some of the pitfalls of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, like being too impressed with themselves and flying around the ship for 10 minutes. Another movie to use an example, I would say, is like Jurassic Park. Use the, in some ways still has some of the most convincing dinosaurs, even like 20, 25 years later, whatever it is. Used a mixture
looks so much better than Jurassic World.
Right. And it's because they're not they weren't overly showy about it. They used practical effects when they needed to. They kept in mind that, I think like Battlestar Galactica, that, there's a certain feeling of realism you get when, like, your cameras can't keep up with things, when things blur, that showing things with crystal clarity can actually be a detriment, because then you're like, oh, I'm looking at a special effect. A good special effect sometimes, but sometimes you want that feeling of vibrant realism that comes from that cinema verite handheld camera style.
Just on that note, I don't want, like, the documentary shaky handheld camera, like, quick zoom in stuff.
Right, I don't think
I tolerate it in Battlestar Galactica. It was stupid as hell in Attack of the Clones.
Right.
And I don't want it in Star Trek.
I think it was perfect for Galactica, which felt like sometimes like a very, ground eye, view of the events.
Yeah.
Trek doesn't generally need that, although they did do some of those sort of motion blur effects in the Kelvin movies. I'm not wholly against it. I think it can be effective. I don't want handheld cameras all the time, but if the ship was under attack and there was handheld cameras as people are running through the corridors or something, I think that could work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Using the special effects to push the innovation and not to... I don't want gloaty special effects that are like long pan-arounds of the sarcophagus ship, or... I don't want them to be showy. I want the story. I want them to serve the story and to get in and get out,
So, moving on to your number 5.
Number 5. All right. I call number 5 non-hokey continuity. So here's the thing. I don't want the Star Wars prequels where everybody seemed to know everybody.
Where Darth Vader built C-3PO.
And Yoda high-fived Chewbacca during a battle. That's exactly what happened. But I wouldn't mind seeing, Dr. Daystrom, the guy who invented the M5 computer. He would have still, I'm sure, been like a hotshot, computer programmer and stuff in his 10 years before Kirk's time. I wouldn't mind him playing some role, an escort mission of him, or him out to check their computer systems during a key episode. I feel like you could see in a battle you could see Matt Decker, maybe. Might not be in. I don't know if he was a captain at the time, but I wouldn't mind seeing his ship.
Oh, yeah. Matt is the dad. Will is the son.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Commodore Decker. Yeah, he probably would have been a captain 10 years earlier. Mm-hmm. Because he wasn't that old of a.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot he was an actual Commodore. So that, or even potentially some characters from Enterprise, I could see showing up.
Okay, so that is actually what I had as earlier in my list. As my number 4 is a cameo.
Okay.
Because every Star Trek show has a cameo in the first episode. Mm-hmm. Next Generation brought Bones in. Mm-hmm. DS9 has Picard. Voyager had Quark. Mm-hmm. Enterprise had footage of Zefram Cochrane giving his speech to explore new life and new civilizations and go boldly where no one has gone before. I hate that he corrected the grammar on that. It's like, no, it's to boldly go where no one, if we're going to be politically correct and modern, to boldly go where no one has gone before, not to
Don't
go
try
boldly.
And shoot down where no one has gone before. That was a change that needed to happen.
No, yeah, I agree with that.
That's not just political.
What with the change?
You about to go off on SJWs next?
The change I won't be okay with is to change to boldly go to go boldly.
Right. I agree. Proper grammar is not always right grammar.
Correct.
I think we just butchered a whole bunch of stuff with that exchange.
Darn tootin'. So, That would put me on my number 5.
Right, and I think I'd be hitting number 4 here.
Well, you just did your 5, so
right.
let me do my 5.
All right, you do whatever you need to do.
Because we skipped to my 4. But...
Okay. Oh, I see. You were jumping around.
So my 5 is funny moments. And I want there to be some
That's on my
comedy.
list too.
Yeah,
it's on my list too.
I had a feeling it would be actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes Star Trek has dropped the ball with that, but there's some really funny stuff in Star Trek that the original series was great at it. DS9 was actually great at it, and it was kind of a necessity there because some of Deep Space Nine got so dark that you needed to have those lighthearted Ferengi episodes.
Right.
I always got laughs from Q, when he would show up on the Next Generation.
Right. He was like there to deliberately take the stuffing out of Picard, who was a very proper kind of guy.
But even you could get humor out of other characters on Next Generation when Q shows up, like when he's lost his powers and he's trying to convince them that they have to help him, and he says, "What do I have to do to you people to prove that I'm mortal?" And Worf just says, "Die."
Yep, that was a classic moment. I also believe everybody will finally remember Worf smashing his mandolin or whatever.
And
when Q was screwing with him
and Cupid when they went back to the Robin Hood thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they kind of did some poor attempts at humor occasionally in Star Trek. I know you're not the biggest fan of Loxana Troy, who's obviously played for laughs.
Right. An overbearing mother-in-law is not what I necessarily wanted from Trek. It's one of those... It's funny, though, because I feel like something more could have been done with her. I just think they didn't find it. And I also think, better writing. She was always a little bit obvious, she's chasing after every man. I felt like she was like a character on Three's Company who would be chasing after Jack Tripper.
Yeah. We also had... there are some attempts at comedy in Enterprise that I thought fell pretty flat.
I remember a few ones kind of bombing out there.
I know some people are fans of the episode Night in Sickbay, but to me it's one of the hardest episodes of Star Trek to watch. And Voyager had some good comedy stuff. The Doctor was pretty hilarious in the later seasons.
Yeah.
Even though, the first episode you think he's like the stuffiest, most boring character ever. Mm-hmm. But they really utilized Robert Picardo in the later seasons and got a lot of great comedy out of him.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, I want to have those laughs, especially since we are getting a very serious, possibly darker show. I do want to have those lighthearted moments where the audience can have some levity.
Yeah, it's something to break the tension. So that was on my list, where the numbering incidentally is somewhat arbitrary on this, but that was number 2 on my list. And the one thing I'll add about it, I'm gonna just do it right here, and we'll skip it when I hit number 2. It's another one of those things I think that the Kelvin movies did pretty well. I think they may have actually overdone it sometimes.
When Kirk falls onto Uhura's boobs, that was why I was like, I don't know if I want JJ to make Star Wars movies, because look at this. We're gonna have it's gonna be like Jar Jar Binks on steroids. It wasn't that. I was wrong, but
there are legit laughs in there too. McCoy, sometimes it's the character in a play. McCoy was great. Even sometimes the doofus little alien that's Scotty's guy, he even got a few laughs out of me, and I hated that concept. There were funny bits in there, and I feel like it's part of the reason I think people loved them. It's also, I think, part of the reason why the Marvel movies do so well is because they have a pretty high degree of humor in there, but they can also veer very dark. So by no means do I think it has to undercut the dark stuff, but I'd like to see it in there. I don't want the fall onto the boobs thing of Abrams, but I wouldn't mind some of that character interplay humor and so a little bit of the energy it brought to the screen. Mm-hmm. But here's a quick question. If it's pretty dark, I don't think Trek has ever done too much of this, would darker humor, do you think, work for you? That's sort of slightly cynical.
If it's written well enough, anything could work. I guess...
I'm going to say Tyrion on Game of Thrones is an example of a character who's always commenting, sometimes has some really funny lines that sum something up in a dark but funny way. It doesn't feel very Trek. I suppose if there was a character who was kind of that guy, maybe... who's the one who I think he's kind of friends with Burnham, the alien?
Oh, it's Lieutenant Saru.
Saru, yeah. if that was an aspect of him, I think especially from an alien culture, sort of morose observations, I think that could be pretty entertaining.
I don't know. I think he's going to be like more of a friendly, lighthearted alien.
And I think that's cool too. I'm just saying, like, if there was an alien like him who was a semi-regular character, that could be...
Yeah.
You could do that. But yeah, by and large, I think they'd be wise to be careful about dark humor. Generally, I think that'd be a dangerous direction for Trek.
So, what do you have for your number 3?
Alright, my number 3, which is... I don't know, is this actually my number 4 one? I don't know.
Or yeah, we're on 4.
Okay. Is that I would like to see some characters who are best friends. It's a kind of specific thing.
That's a good one.
But it's in the tradition of Kirk and Spock. Even though it wasn't always spoken on the show, it was so very clearly delineated. But like Geordi and Data, and even like I haven't finished watching Voyager, but like, would you say like Janeway and like Seven kind of became, if not
That's
best
more
friends,
like a mother-daughter type
right?
Thing. But I would say
I
for
guess,
sure Tom and Harry.
Oh yeah. That's Tom and Harry are the obvious more friends.
On DS9, you have O'Brien and Julian, and even Dax and Cisco.
Right.
TNG had Picard and Beverly.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely want that.
And I think you can get a lot out of it when you see people who are particularly close discussing something, because it's almost like they step away from everybody else to have a private conversation where they cut to the heart of something. Or it's meaningful because we care about these characters and we can see, they've got years of friendship. When they fight, it's meaningful. When they agree on something, it's meaningful. I just feel like it'd be a good way to lens a lot of the drama by making it very personal.
And I think we might be getting some of that with Saru and Burnham, who they've said have a brother-sister relationship.
Yep. I think that could work out really well. It's one of the things I'm most looking forward to, and I also feel like they might not in just an episode or two necessarily develop it that much, especially if they're just meeting, or do we know, are they just meeting?
Well, no, they both serve on the Shinzu.
Okay, so they're a long time.
They've probably known each other for 7 years.
Yeah.
Because we know that's how long her...
So
assignment was.
Essentially, fingers crossed that they pull it off. I would love for some characters who are like very clearly friends to be, driving some of the drama.
Yeah. No, that I actually was thinking about putting that on my list at some point, and somehow I forgot about it. But
I forgot about music. So
my number 4 was Cameo, but we've already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I could add though that maybe like Phlox from Enterprise would be a good candidate. T'Pol would be great. I don't think Jolene Blalock would do it because she doesn't have the... She's not too into Star Trek now that she's done with that show.
Okay. I didn't know about that. She's one of those ones who was like, I did my time and I'm done with it.
But with an alien like Phlox, you can explain that he's still alive and kick in 100 years later, or even like the Andorian Shran, played by Jeffrey Combs, who's a recurring character on the original, on Enterprise, someone like him, but. Yeah, we kind of already talked about cameos, so I'm going to go into my number 3, and my number 3 thing is going to be Earth. I want to see Earth in this time period. We don't really see Earth in the original series at all.
Right, other than time travel episodes.
Yes. We don't really see it until the motion picture, and then almost... Damn near every Star Trek movie shows Earth, at least
San
for
Francisco.
just one scene. Yeah. But Next Generation showed Earth a handful of times, DS9 a handful of times, Voyager a handful of times. Enterprise spent a lot more time on Earth, which makes sense because they're closer to Earth and
right. And it was the humanity's sort of first foray into space.
Yeah. So I would really like to see. I don't want to see Earth in like every episode or anything. One of my frustrations with Star Trek Into Darkness was that it spent a lot of time on Earth again after Star Trek 09.
Right.
Spent a lot of time on Earth, and I wanted them to get off Earth.
Right. Yeah. It felt stifled. When Star Trek is such a worldly, galaxy-ly series.
It's one of the best things about Star Trek Insurrection. That movie for sure has problems, but I love that you don't see any of Earth in that movie, which was rare for the movies. But yeah, I want to see Earth in the 2250s. I want to see what it looks like. During that time period.
I think they're particularly well equipped to do that now. I liked seeing it in the movies. It's funny to look back at Star Trek 3, and I remember thinking it's still a reflection of the 80s. You know, there were 80s visuals that they were 80s. It's 80s futurism, and but I was like, oh man, Kirk's jacket's so damn cool. I need that jacket.
I love his apartment.
Yeah, his apartment looks cool.
I would love to live in a recreation of his apartment.
It'd be awesome. Didn't he actually did he have the Golden Gate Bridge outside his apartment somewhere? Was it visible?
I don't think it's visible through his windows,
okay.
But
maybe I'm just thinking of some of the other stuff.
But I mean, yeah, like it is in San Francisco. Yeah. So
they on their limited budget, they did a great job of making you feel like you were really in Kirk's headquarters, his house. I hadn't thought about that, but I think that's a neat idea. And I think they're clearly going to cultural awareness mode with like Klingons, so I think they could put that same sort of thought into trying to image an Earth that's unexplored territory in a way for Trek.
It'd be good juxtaposition if you're trying to show the Klingon culture like up against this Federation culture.
Yeah.
If you showed a good look at Earth.
Right. One thing we rarely see in Star Trek is that sense of sort of news traveling around and like how the populace, right? Like what is Earth, as sort of a centerpiece of the Federation, what do they think when there's potential war with Klingons? I don't want to see newscasters and stuff because that's not a very Trek thing.
Yeah, that'd be dumb.
It would be weird, but I wouldn't mind seeing something like, at least suggesting the people's reaction to it.
Deep Space Nine did that a lot.
Did they?
In Enterprise, even with after like the Xindi attack, they there's definitely like that was obviously inspired on, based on what was going on in post 9/11 America, but. Yeah, there's definitely like a cultural shift when stuff like that happened. They talk about characters just mention it to each other. But
right.
So what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3 is going to be a quick one because we touched on, this is the one that got undercut by the new Klingon news but it's still basically classic Klingons is what I want to say, whether it's Next Generation or TOS Klingons. It is one of the few sticking points for me that they were so coy in a way about like these new Klingons being like, are they the only Klingons we're ever gonna see? Everybody loves the frickin' Klingons, and I don't need I'm okay with them letting their new design shine, but I would like for somewhere in some way to see glimpses of either of the other two big canonical ones, just so that there is a sense that this is in the real the Trek world that we know and love, that they are not whitewashing them or whatever it is they're gray washing. I don't know what they would be doing, but I don't want that lost as a result of this. I don't think it particularly would be. I think it's still going to show up in all sorts of other ways, but I don't want the Klingons that we've seen to completely replace the classic Klingons. Sounds like that probably won't. Seems like they're saying that these guys, sarcophagus ships guys, are not the only Klingons in the universe.
Yeah. And they have mentioned that there's 24 different Klingon houses, and all the houses will look a little different.
At some point I need them to go to one of those houses, and they need to have long hair and like leather body armor with spikes on the boots, or they need to look like Cossacks.
Or look at like the TOS Klingons. Yeah. I want to see both.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I want to see variety.
Yep.
My number 2 is hard sci-fi concepts. And I don't know how you would have room for this, and I think I might know how, but how you would have room for this in your narrative arc that you're doing, the whole season spanning story.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to see like some cool sci-fi stuff. I like it.
Some ideas that actually kind of push your head a little bit.
This is something that was more in the Next Generation than especially in Star Trek Voyager, where they would.
You're saying you want to see a Darmok episode?
Yeah, that would be cool, but I'm thinking more sci-fi than that. Like when they would do like stuff with like the temporal anomalies or like really weird life forms, and,
right?
Like the really like science fiction type stuff. I think that might be something they're doing with like the Discovery, with whatever's going on there, where they have this fungus scientist on board, and they have a new way to fly, like. There's something weird about the Discovery, and I think that might be into some cool sci-fi stuff. Might actually be loosely based on some actual science that's going on now.
Like an extrapolation sort of thing.
So,
that reminded me of a one that didn't make my list, but I'm just going to kind of cheat it in on the coattails of yours, which is I would like to see over the span of its existence, science fiction writers who are like novelists, not necessarily associated with Trek, brought in. I don't want. I always want them to like lens it through Star Trek. I want it to be Star Trek's visions of the future. I want Star Trek philosophy and characters and aliens and stuff in there. But yeah, I wouldn't mind some slightly more, the away from the bumps and ridges aliens and into higher, more conceptual things. Beings that exist outside of time, aliens that only think in binary terms, like on that old TNG episode. Any of that kind of stuff that a science fiction writer might bring to the table, but that a dramatist might not necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know who would be like good writers to go to in this day and age. Like Isaac Asimov ain't around.
Right, and I'm unplugged enough, I guess, from like science fiction novels right at the moment to not know.
If you leave a comment and let us know who are some good
who are the guys who would be interesting to
now.
Poach for Star Trek.
And so this brings us to your number 1.
Yep, I'm ready for it. Are you at your number 1 as well?
Yeah.
All right. So my number 1 is my hippiest one. Is that I want a depiction of a universe where rationalism and empathy can win the day. I feel like I need that comforting hand on my shoulder that the principles of Starfleet. I don't want it to win every time. I don't want it to be without a struggle. And I even want them to be challenged, like I said earlier. But I want, at heart, I want to know that, like Kirk or Picard or Janeway, that these guys can make things go right by using their intellect and their heart.
Yeah, no, that's Star Trek in a nutshell. Yeah, the combination of rationalism and empathy. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to phrase it. But in fact, I'm gonna use that from now on. It
sounds good. I actually did think about it a little bit, and I'm like, well, what is it like if I pared it down to just like sort of its simplest terms? And I'm a big fan of Wrath of Khan, and I do like the deeper themes that it touches on about fathers and sons and aging and the nature of vengeance and old baggage. Whether it's the vengefulness of Khan or his unfinished business with his ex. I think you pointed out before. It's in some ways it's not very Star Trek-y in the sense that it doesn't
It's the least Star Trek-y movie.
Right. It doesn't
the Kelvin movies are more Star Trek-ish than the Wrath of Khan.
It's a very human story, but it sort of doesn't speak to the ideals of the Federation. Although in some ways Kirk does embody the Federation ideals of that NASA, you don't give up, you find a way. So I don't think that's completely true, but it's just interesting to me that as beloved as it is, that there is it isn't quite what I would want from the show. That's what I hope to see.
That works great as one movie, but you don't want an entire Star Trek show with that tone.
Right. I think when I was a kid, I thought I did.
Well, you were a dumb kid.
A lot of kids are dumb. Sometimes they grow up to be dumb adults.
They're all dumb. And most of them stay dumb.
This is a very un-Trekky conversation we're having right now. That's because we're jaundiced people living in our times and not in Star Trek times.
Yes.
All right, let's hear your number 1.
My number 1 is social commentary. Speaking of our times and Star Trek times, I want to see our times reflected in Star Trek times. I want to see stories that are relevant to the social situations of 2017, which Trek has a big history of doing. And
I'm guessing you don't want it to be so heavy-handed as an alien race that where a populist leader named Commander Dromp or something like that has won.
Yeah, instead of Tekuvma, he's Tarumphra, and he's trying to build a space wall to keep all the Tellarites out of the Klingon Empire.
Let me tell you, as a comic shop manager, I appreciate that comics do also reflect the times, but they've been very on the nose for the last year or so, with lots of walls being built. Currently in Aquaman, which I'm enjoying. It's a good storyline, but there's like a magical barrier, sectioning off Atlantis from the rest of the world, and there's a demagogue leader. It's a little on the nose. So yes, I absolutely want to see that social commentary, but I do need to see it done pretty imaginatively.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular, like, would you like to see some of the complexities of like international affairs, of like some of the what I almost think would be interesting? This would almost, I don't know if this would need to be a lighter episode or not. You know how, like, old folks hate millennials? And often case it's a sort of a unfair condemnation. I wonder if they could find some alien race that might represent that debate and argument, the cyclical battle, hatred of whatever the next generation is doing.
Maybe. But yeah, that's another cool thing. When you're doing episodic television, you can go to a planet and make that planet have whatever kind of shit going on that you need to be your allegory.
I mean, I get the impression that they're going to try and avoid that. We did talk about that risk before in previous episodes of, like, aliens being just one thing. In its own way, that's kind of like almost evoking stereotypes. It can be very efficient. It's like, oh, Klingons are the belligerent race or whatever, but, ultimately, you hope that you have some depth. But in an hour, in a 40 or 50 minutes of TV, in a standalone episode, sometimes it's convenient that the aliens are just one thing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff that there's room to talk for now. Just, in the United States, just looking at the rise of, white nationalism. We have Nazis marching proudly down the streets like I've never seen before in my lifetime. Hate crimes have increased, stuff like that. We also have the police brutality.
Right.
Is getting talked about more and more, and it's getting exposed more.
Antifa is in there, so it's there's interesting blurred lines all over the place. People having to decide what they're willing to do to stand up for something, how far they're willing to go. This feels it feels like DS9 was the closest probably to these stories to our age or reflecting it. Which is freaking scary. Scary as fuck. Like you say, the United States alone has plenty to talk about.
The geopolitical situations with, North Korea and Russia and...
I think we are going to see something of the...
You could do Brexit. You could have a planet leave the Federation.
The interrelationship of alien worlds, I think. I hope that is a big thing. The way that things can domino, the way events will chain together. That a seemingly unimportant, planet could end up being completely important in a geopolitical scene. What would you call it? A galacto-political scene, I guess. Yeah, galacto-political. Anyway, so yeah, I agree. Social commentary.
They can bring in the Tholians to be one of those smaller powers that's doing some stuff.
For sure.
I was going to mention the Tholians when I talked about classic aliens. That escaped my mind. But I really want Tholians in Discovery. In fact, I think they could do a whole season 2 about Tholians.
And also just go and mentally add in me wrongfully asking for Hordas before they're even discovered.
No Horda and no Gorn.
What?
They can't show a Gorn.
They could meet a Gorn and then get amnesia?
Maybe. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Ted Sullivan or Akiva Goldsman, but somebody at one of the panels they were doing, one of the producers of the show said, "We're all obsessed with Gorn, but we know we can't use them, so it kind of sucks."
Yeah, and I don't want some cheesy half-assed version of them either. Go ahead and do something new.
But I think that is going to wrap it up with our top 10 list. So be sure to let us know in the comments what things you are looking forward to in Discovery, what you hope will be in the show. Give us your own top 10 list. And
we're going to all be able to assess these lists after the fact, too.
We'll see
we can return
who gets what they want.
Yep.
Who did Discovery cater to the most? And this is going to be the last...
I hope it's my sex one.
I'm sure there's going to be some sexuality touched on in the show. That is like the most popular thing to put on TV. But that's going to wrap it up for not only this installment of Tex-Trek, but also the series we've been doing for the last year of Discovering Discovery.
When next we meet,
we will be talking about the first episode of Star Trek Enterprise,
right?
Broken Bow, which will be the final premiere episode of Star Trek that we'll discuss. We've talked about all the previous show premieres, and you'll have our thoughts on the first episodes of every show as we're getting ready to compare Star Trek Discovery's premiere to the past Trek premieres.
Yep. And the next time we're talking Discovery, it'll be post-Discovery.
Yeah, it will be on...
Probably by a few hours.
September 20... Probably early hours of September 25th at some point. And we will let you know what we think about Star Trek Discovery. So very exciting. We
Better
got
not suck.
about a week to go.
Yep.
Yeah. My litmus test is going to be: is it better than Encounter at Farpoint or not?
Yeah, that was a dry one. Although it is also interesting to see.
It's a low bar to clear.
It's a low bar to clear. Yeah. It was not without its moments and ideas though, but it was like it was still trying to figure out what Trek was, and it had one foot, I think, in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It felt like.
We've already talked about that though.
Yeah, I know.
We don't need to go back to Encounter at Farpoint. We're going forward to Discovery.
Well, what I'm saying is there has been a wealth of Star Trek since then, and I feel like they should be able to get off on that right foot right away. I'm watching you, Discovery.
Yeah, we'll
see you out there.
So until next time,
live long and prosper, y'all.
Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter at TXTrek, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.